this is another piece of good news. I wanted to make sure we ended the show on a nice, fun note, and I think Jose, especially as a someone who works in the teaching profession, who does not have the ability to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, I think you will also appreciate. I know it's a shame that you also appreciate this story. So there has been some case precedent that has been set. Now it could evolve, but right now, very good. Detroit students have the right to an education, federal appeals court rules. This is really big. This is really big. Now, it could go in a number of ways, but right now, I'm going to tell you the story as it is right now. It could change right now. Uh, American children have a fundamental right to get at least a basic education. A federal appeals court ruled Thursday in a ruling legal scholars said could affect disadvantaged children across the country. This played out across the country could be the difference if you just I'm just going to speak about it if you want to look at it from a capitalist point of view, because it's all the other ways of better teaching, all that's so obvious, but just from a capitalistic point of view, this is an amazing way that in 20 years you can really shoot up the GDP by actually teaching students well. Anyway, Detroit students filed a suit in 2016 documenting alarming conditions in rodent-infested, crumbling schools that lacked certified teachers and up-to-date textbooks. That's America for you. It's the thing that we would say other countries, they can't govern themselves. They have rodent-infested, crumbling schools that lack certified teachers and up-to-date textbooks. They also have oil, so we're going to go take them out. A trial court judge agreed with the conditions the students documented were deplorable. This is during the initial trial before it got appealed. But throughout the case, because he said the Constitution does not guarantee the right to an education. Now, this is important. Basically, so he's looking at the things, this case that's being brought up in Detroit, and he says, you have a really good case, but you don't have a right to an education, so I have to throw it out. So then they appeal, and when you do an appeal, you say something was done wrong in this lawsuit was done incorrectly, the judge treated this wrong, evidence got in, so I'm appealing it. And so the appeal in this case was he threw it out because he said there's no legal grounds, constitutional grounds for education. So that's what they actually appealed it on. And 2 of the 3 Sixth Circuit judges who heard the case on appeal last fall found that it does. Every meaningful interaction between a citizen, I love this sentence, by the way, every meaningful interaction between a citizen and a state that is predicated on a minimum level of literacy. Meaning that access to literacy is necessary to access our political process. That seems like a pretty reasonable way to connect it into the Constitution. He's saying, look, we have a Constitution. Constitution says people have to be able to interact with it, have to be able to participate in it. Part of being able to participate in it means you have to be able to read. That seems pretty straightforward. A lot of these kids can't read. So this would force, I'm not sure if they would force how it would work with funding either state or federal, but it might force the federal government to actually have to pay some more. I don't know. I'm not a legal scholar. Anyway, so now here's the interesting thing. So this is actually even more interesting because the person who can affect what happens next is on the short list for Biden's VP. So Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer could ask the U.S. Supreme Court to reverse the decision.
My God.
But her office is still reviewing the case. So we're in a really nice position because if she's being considered for VP, the last thing that she's going to want to do from a personal power point of view is put that in jeopardy. And one thing that would put that in jeopardy is her being known as the person who killed education in Detroit and the U.S. and her teachers. Yeah. And she might do that if she wasn't running for VP, depending on where her allegiances lie or how much she's worried about having to actually fund those poor kids and get them educated. But here we are in a very interesting situation that is developing where education could actually be a right. And if it starts with, because right now they're really just talking about K through 12, but if that gets cemented and then you have case precedent built on top of that, you could easily expand that to college. And you can, in a really, really, really weird way, you could get free college tuition, free college for everyone through this case in 10 years or 15 years. It's probably be too late. We probably want to do it before then, but this is really groundbreaking. Really happy.
That is really awesome story and
Yeah.
great take on it because Gretchen, the Democrats in general, are out to get public education and dismantle it. I was actually very concerned with Lori Lightfoot getting unilateral powers today in Chicago for those same reasons, but I don't know how that would work out in Chicago as well as it could in Detroit. I mean, stopping public education, it has been a goal of moneyed interests. Like Betsy DeVos's family, like who runs their public education right now, have been trying to dismantle public education. And Detroit, as a city that's been dubbed a failure, that's been purposefully gentrified to that point, fighting back like this. That school kids have to sue their country. Just thank you for bringing up that story and for that analysis, Daniel. Nothing to add other than that, Baltimore and Chicago and Detroit are in danger of this, and it's good to see that development in Detroit.
Am I crazy?
Palindrome.
Am I crazy? Because I read this, or when you showed the story, I didn't. It's not a right. Education isn't a right for the American people. I don't. I guess I was just not. I just thought that this is something that everybody is. I mean, I understand that there are shitty schools, and like I am so against that, right? Like, doesn't matter if you're in a rich neighborhood or a poor neighborhood. Everybody should have the same equal amount of education. I always tell people that education is most likely the answer to everything, right? I mean, you want to look at the roots of things, like people need to be educated. They need to understand things. And yes, this is a great story. And I agree. It's mind boggling. It kind of just like shakes me to my, I had a fairly good education. I grew up in Chicago, and I mean, growing up, it was fine for me. And I just thought that everybody, oh my God, just to think that this is now becoming a thing where it should be a right it kind of blows my mind.
Remember this. You have to remember, all of you guys have seen Rules for Rulers, so you're going to know what I'm talking about when I reference this specific part. The reason that you build a school in a democracy isn't because it's a right. It's because it increases the productivity of the citizens later in life. That's the reason that you do it. That is the reason that you do it from a political point of view. It's never been a right. It's just been here's how we increase GDP, and this is actually a really good cost benefit. So literally just from an economic point of view, it's really, really, really good to have schools.
So why doesn't our country do that then?
It's because of having absolute power.
Because they view it as not all people really need it. What they really do is they go through the motions, and they're like, here's in a sense, if you want to do a right, it's not actually a right, but if you want to kind of look at what we have and what the right is, even though there isn't one, it's people have a right to a room that has a building that has rooms in it that people are in, that kids go to, where stuff is talked to them. That's sort of the right that we have now. What this is really talking about, because let me quote the part where they're talking about the conditions real quick. That where was it? Here. Documenting alarming conditions in rodent-infested, crumbling schools that lacked certified teachers and up-to-date textbooks. Now, from the government's point of view, from a Rules for Rulers point of view, there's someone to be very frank talking about it from the point of view of people in power. They're just dumb black kids who have no money. We don't give a fuck about them. That's the point of view they're looking at. These are people that have no value in communities that have no value, that they wish would just go away. Those are the people that are supposed to go to your McDonald's and serve you your fries. That's the role they have in society.
Emanuel,
so here's what I want to bring
flat
up.
out said that he's not going to do anything for those
Go ahead,
kids.
because I haven't said anything.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Go ahead, Jose. Go.
No, I just, because, Rahm Emanuel did say that to Karen Lewis about, the kids on the west side and the south side, that those kids aren't going to amount to anything, and he's not going to do anything for them. That's really what kicked off a long war. A lot of our education in Chicago is still teaching kids from these inner city communities to work in manufacturing jobs that are supposed to poison them and limit their life expectations, but aren't there anymore. And that's why you have such high unemployment, because we're still teaching kids from lower income, from minority communities, to work dirty factory jobs that aren't there anymore. So when the Republicans are saying, oh, those immigrants are there to take your jobs, they know that because they designed it that way against you. Number one. And number two, they also know it's a lie because those jobs are going away and they're just creating a lot more human desperation out there to try and navigate people's lives. But I mean, like, there are communities that like have a pipeline towards, tech jobs or military jobs or like high level jobs. In Chicago, people probably know a lot of people that go their way through unions and trade jobs that way. So it's controlled. But the idea for an education to just be a right for itself, for its own sake, has been a goal of a lot of teachers in public education for a long time. And it's something that has always been under attack because a citizen educated just for its own sake doesn't really help power.
All right. So here's something that we need to remember. And this is something there's one thing we have to remember, that this is the state of Michigan we're talking about. If the governor is that crazy enough to do something like, I don't know, challenge this or tell it to go down to the Supreme Court, let's just brace ourselves for that, because this is the United States we're talking about. These are our current politicians, a neoliberal system that we have. And it would be a disaster because then we would have a sitting governor, which, mind you, she hasn't done anything yet, but she would basically be saying, education's not a right in this country. Now let's look at the bigger picture. The United States is falling behind the rest of the world. We are stagnant. We are not in first place. We're not in second place. Hell, we're not even in 10th place. We are nearing the bottom in regards to how we can compete with the entire global community, because the other countries have figured out that an educated population, an intelligent population, a population that is prepared for this future world of automation and AI, they will be able to compete. We cannot. We are stuck in the 1950s. We have a mindset. We have an education system that hasn't evolved since past the 1950s. So this is fantastic news. And I'm glad that you found this story, Daniel. I mean, it's a sign of hope. But this is for other people to be inspired to make sure in your own state, in your own city, to fight for education, because we are not going to walk out of this crisis relying on the traditional system that we've been relying on for years. It just doesn't work. We've seen it. We've seen it all fall apart. This country right now is in a unique spot where we can dictate how our future will go. And we cannot allow these politicians to continue to control our education, to control our environment, to control our communities. We have to fight back and start pushing forward to build that better future. Education is a right. It's always been a right. It's just people have never really fought for it until now, just now. And this is the opportunity that we all need. And that's how we build that better future, because that next generation, they're going to require education. They're going to require to be able to compete with the rest of the world. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to fall backwards and remain in a stagnant spot. And who knows what that looks like at this point.
And really quickly, Jerome, to your point earlier, and to building on Jose's point, government doesn't think it's all that helpful to teach kids that have to work in the factories a lot of education, because then they'll start questioning why they're paid a certain way, why safety aren't there. Then they'll be smart enough and educated enough to form a union. So you educate people just enough to accomplish the tasks that you expect from them.
That shit is so sad. That's so sad.
It's disgusting. Not only is it sad, but this is the current state of affairs. But just to remind everyone, this is how it's been under the previous Democratic and Republican administrations, under previous Congresses, and not once have they ever lifted a finger to help the people. And not once have they ever spoke up to make our lives better. It's only now, when everything's falling apart, do people actually are we actually finally seeing that this whole system is nothing but crap. Daniel.
Here's another thing, Jerome. In terms of the history of public schools came about for the purpose of getting factory jobs for kids and getting them educated enough to run those power looms. That's the entire reason schools came in the first place, is because you don't need to go to school to be to run a farm. So we didn't have them. We had private schools for those that could afford it, that were good enough, that were your betters, that could actually run things. But once factories started replacing agriculture, that's when public schools were introduced. Because again, it's not done as a right. It's not done to make people happier or smarter or better. It's done to increase productivity. That's the reason.
I would say.
Go ahead, Jose. What's the final word?
Sorry, just two things. Just like because nothing good in America ever happens for its own sake. So it's all usually awful, cynical reasoning underneath it, which just I thought about my first when you were kind of describing public schools, I thought about Facebook. If it's free, if the service is free, then you're the product. Kind of
Yep,
like
very
it's kind of
true.
what public schools unfortunately have been. But I do want to say, I went through Chicago public schools.
Same.
There's
As of I right here.
there's not there's a lot of crappy teachers, there's a lot of awesome teachers, there's a lot of what have you of humanity in there. But working in the public school system, I will tell you, there's plenty of people that are happy to be part of a system that builds a foundation for socialization of kids.
Mhm.
And that might be all they have. And if all we can do is help raise for a small amount of time a socially well-adjusted human being that likes to interact with others and get along well in society, we feel like we're doing our part. And I do think that there's a big fear of public schools being just that, and when they should just be that, should just be more of an acclimating zone for a lot of fundamentals of education, mathematics, literacy, and honestly, internet use and technology use going to have to be a big part of it. But we could have we've always had these resources at our fingertips to make a better society. The fact that we're the worst equipped country during this pandemic, it has nothing to do with how people are or this or that. It has to do with the Byzantine politics that is driven by greed and corruption, that views us human beings, the masses that create the public sphere, as the product to sell, whether it's crappy food or toxic medicine that keeps you perpetually sick, or just mind-numbing entertainment, like we're doing now.
Yeah, and just
All right,
I just
so-
want to add very quickly one little. I know we're way over time.
Yeah,
but
we are way over time. We gotta.
So I want to add just a quick personal anecdote, because I actually went to school in Oak Park at OPRF, and it's a very good school, because property taxes are really, really, really high in Oak Park, so the school gets just an enormous amount of money per student. And I remember I would hear it throughout my years there, just these fights of these Oak Park parents that were absurdly pissed that these people crossed the Austin street. So if you don't know Chicago, the separating street between Oak Park and Chicago is Austin. There was just a lot of people that were right on the other side of Austin, or they were a couple blocks in, that would have the audacity that instead of going to those poor rundown schools, they would try, even if it was illegal, to try and put their kids in OPRF so they would have a better life than them. And there was just no end to how upset Oak Parkers were that these people are fucking taking money to try. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Oak Parkers are the people that are supposed to rule the world, not those people in Austin.
Yeah, and we actually did a lot of reports in South Austin too, and in Oak Park as well. And yeah, it's like night and day. And trust me, education is a right. We got to fight for it and make sure we maintain it. So here's hoping the governor of Michigan does the right thing, and she just allows this thing to happen so that education is recognized as a right, because it's long overdue in this country.